At times, the principles of spirituality seem counterintuitive, so different from the physical laws. For example, physically, the more something fills up, the heavier it becomes. But in spirituality, the more I fill up, the lighter I become. The more content I am, the lighter I become. A very important spiritual principle is that the deeper my wisdom, the more broad my perspective, the more simple my mind becomes. A sign of wisdom, of thinking deeply, is not to think a lot, but to think less. Very high quality. I think about the astronaut in outer space, looking out through the window of the rocket at the planet Earth. The thoughts are naturally very simple. A single green-blue orb cradled in that inky black. All united. All the details, little issues, even the conflicts don't make sense. Just the single thought, we're all in it together. All traveling on this one planet together. What he said or she said, what he did or she did, doesn't matter anymore. The same happens when I truly go into inner space. Inner space doesn't mean I take some problem from the world inside for reflection. It means I leave the physical world behind, go beyond, and return to the self, to the experience of who and what I really am. A soul, an eternal being separate from the body, just a tiny invisible spark of living energy. Everything is temporary, except me. And the sign that I have really touched that experience is I will naturally feel peaceful. No effort. I will naturally let go. No effort. I will be at peace with myself and with everything going on around me. Om Shanti.
Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. Tonight's topic is keeping a broad spiritual perspective. And listening to the commentary, Sister Judy, when you were talking about, when I'm really going deeper, I would actually be thinking less. And this brings up a couple of questions that some students have shared recently, and actually even tonight, listening to one of the senior students share. But a few weeks ago, another student had asked, what do I need to tell myself inside to be able to have, a better perspective of a certain situation? And tonight, listening to one of the senior students share that if I just tell myself again and again enough times that I'm a peaceful soul, I'll actually start to feel it. How do I tell the difference from just telling myself something that's just becomes a thought, just like that student who asked that question earlier, versus actually going somewhere deeper where I can see things in a more simpler way? It just feels that listening to other students share, they kind of get stuck still. These are just thoughts, and it's a bit of an analysis. It's a bit of a lot of thinking, a lot of processing, but not really actually going somewhere inside.
Om Shanti. So it's very interesting when we're, say, grappling with something and someone says, well, try this. But we still are kind of attached to our way of sorting it out. So we don't really throw ourselves completely into the method that's been offered. And this really applies in this particular case of, this idea of connecting, getting kind of to a point, connecting to the experience of being a soul with the promise that it will shift how I feel about things, think about things, and it will give me clarity. I kind of have to do it completely. And I think that's like, give it my all. I can't kind of, be holding, trying to get into this experience of I am a soul while still grappling with, once I am a soul, I'll be able to sort out my son's problems or the issues at work. So these are kind of counterproductive ideas to be holding. And so we saw in the beginning of the organization, and I think it's why it was so effective. We don't do that now, so don't despair. But at the beginning, they were actually completely put in what they called a bhati, that they really were put into an environment, a context where the worldly was really, they were more easily able to go beyond the worldly and completely commit themselves to the experience of being a soul without any particular desire or outcome, just that one objective. And because the concept first, asks us, do you at least have the faith that you're a soul? Of course, this won't work if I'm not even open. Um, and just wanting, I find it intriguing in its own right to experience myself to be a soul, throwing myself completely into it. And then there'll be these signs and signals that I've been successful. And then I start to feel and think and see differently.
Perhaps I just wonder, when you share that with someone who's grappling, if possibly they don't know if they have or not. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
I don't know if, without those kinds of conditions they had at the beginning, I don't know if it's really easily possible. I suppose if I look at myself, I would assume that I was probably mixing when I first came. but I recognized the value of experiencing and really the truth of experiencing. So after that, it was just sticking with it, which I think is what this senior student was suggesting today, is sticking with it. We see the same thing. Recently I I had to get a certain mouthpiece. Issue was identified in the mouth, so they gave me this mouthpiece, and it was ordered. And then I went to get it fitted to pick it up. I put it on, and I thought, will I ever get used to having this in my mouth? And they kept saying, "Oh yeah, no, no, we've got clients now who refuse to sleep without it." I'm like, really? I can't. And I'm still waiting to get used to it. But I do keep wearing it as I'm supposed to every night because I understand the reason it was given. And I do see little shifts in how I experience it. So it is important. And some say that I am the bringer of doom and gloom, but I do feel it can be somewhat useful to share with someone what they might expect when they embark on anything, actually, not just a spiritual practice, anything. In the spiritual practice, there will be resistance. And it's actually mostly resistance that's gumming up the works. But that would go for anything, like they were trying to warn me about this mouthpiece, changing a diet, starting a new exercise regime. Here's what you can expect to feel. That's very important. So I don't jump ship and I continue with it. For some, it comes at different times for others. Everyone's unique, but it's very useful to know what to expect, both in terms of signs and signals that I am on the right track, as well as how resistance will show up. Otherwise, I might, yeah. And one of them is doubt. Doesn't seem to be working, not sure what I'm doing. It's so having and being really connected to spiritual supports is very helpful. I know for me, connected to a spiritual community, there's a subtle support there. But in general, yeah, knowing there will be this resistance and to not jump ship.
It's hard to see which question to ask next because something else popped up from what you shared. But maybe I will ask that is for someone who just keeps going, is it because there must be something that would be keeping them going? Is it that as you go on this journey, that there will be newness, there will be something? Because if you're going to wait till the very end until for benefits, I don't know what is going to keep someone to continue. Um, so what are your feelings about that? Because I mean, there is really a reality to move into, and for someone to continue to keep going, and then perhaps maybe talking with those who are new students who are just coming into it, it doesn't sound very appealing if they're like, oh my gosh, I mean, how much do I have to keep applying and I'm seeing nothing happen?
One thing I've noticed is, of course, everyone's very different. So, there's some souls who don't appear like there's a lot going on, but they really stick with it and they actually are developing a depth that eventually will manifest, but they're developing a depth that's very useful. Others, it seems to come very easily, and yet they don't actually stick around. So everyone's really, really different. Um, I always feel that when we're told you're a soul, there's a subconscious piece that's quite profound in all of this. That's kind of pulling us along. So we're operating on the conscious level, which I think some of the questions are about. But then there's this whole subconscious piece that could be recognizing, could be pulling me forward, could be, keeping me to stick with it. And that's really beyond the explainable. Everyone is so unique. It's impossible to really suggest what this is going to look like for each person. And for me, part of, there's the pull, but part of me, what was big for me was actually the push that I really did not like the other way of operating. And to be given an option which I recognized had great benefit, even if I may not have been experiencing it, but I could recognize it was an answer, a solution to that other way of operating, which is basically built on a lack of self respect. That alone, I don't want to go back. That alone was an attainment for me, even though I was encountering maybe a lot of resistance. But to know that I have a method that I've recognized as an answer to what I was calling out for, that kept pulling me forward.
Perhaps then, keeping with the topic for tonight from what you're sharing, have you ever experienced resistance being in a study now where it can be quite strong and can make you kind of forget, that broad perspective? Because from what I'm hearing you share is that there is this increased disinterest, just of the old way. It's just not working. But the resistance that can come up can kind of look like some sort of form of that kind of resistance that you were so disinterested in the first place.
I remember when I was a few years old in this study, and I was actually at the headquarters, and I was finding it quite challenging. There was a lot of really upheaval inside. And I remember coming back and chatting with a senior sister and telling her I actually found what was meant to be for many, a very beautiful experience. I actually was finding it quite challenging. And it was very lovely. She asked me point blank, so why didn't you leave? And I mean, the answer was very clear to me. I said I could not quit on myself. So, yes, I mean, definitely opposition, etc., comes up. I think if one is really paying attention to what is being shared in this practice, and that I know is an art and a challenge for us, then I'm able to focus on, and this is a big picture thing, again, the very few simple things I need to focus on to develop power. And the more power I can develop, and the better able I am to meet the opposition that comes along.
Just from your sharing that soul asked you, why didn't you leave? Maybe kind of go back to that question that one student says, no, what can I tell myself? Like, what can I? Then I realized just listening to you share, I was distilling in essence, like, how can I just be real? Like, forget about, one of my questions I'm asking, but it just sounded like whoever that soul had asked was really just encouraging you, and unintentionally or intentionally, whatever the case was, to be very real with yourself. Could you share what your thoughts are in terms of that, in terms of keeping this broad perspective, especially in the face of resistance? I think sometimes souls think that, as you continue along, things, yes, they get easier, but also when you continue along, the resistance can be a lot more subtle. I know you had shared recently that, I'll use that phrase, ego is very active right now, and that might not seem very appealing to some.
I've always personally been very attracted to this quality of being real, and constantly am checking that in myself. I used to often say before coming to study that that was the one thing I was really hungering for. And coming into it, I realized what real is. I could articulate, of course, it's the real self, the truth, if you will, but also self respect feels real to me. And again, I'm given two choices now. Either I live with self respect or I live without it, which we call ego. that is not really an acceptable choice. So, a huge part of this study is set up around this idea of aim and objective. What is my destination? And that needs to be real or meaningful to me. And I have to constantly be revising it, not looking at what's wrong or right in this moment when I'm experiencing storms, but keeping that objective and the method I've been given to reach it. We have a habit in terms of big picture, because we got so caught up in the minutia. This has now simply become a habit, and I say simply because that's very hopeful. That's not real. It's just a habit and I need to understand that even as it's happening, of getting caught up in little details. It's what ego likes to do, is constantly gather evidence for its existence. So getting caught up in little details, but constantly keeping the big picture to me is that aim and objective of where am I trying to get to, which is that real state of self-respect. And what is the method to do that? A relationship with myself and God. I'm constantly keeping those two, whether or not I'm feeling it or anything, that's not the point. I just know that those are the two things, big picture, I need to keep in front of me. They are real or meaningful to me. And the more I keep doing that, that gives me a power of its own. Even if I'm not experiencing it, it gives me a power of its own because it's a wonderful anchor. Before I had nothing, but now I have these two things that I can position myself relative to.
Perhaps it's what you're sharing is connected to the question I was going to originally ask you, but I'll still hold off on that for now. Just when you were sharing about just revising, keeping things very clear for yourself, is that what you meant by you might not be feeling that, but it's like a secret code? Because when ego is very loud, it feels like it kind of desensitizes you. So it seems like somehow you're able to stay anchored, even though ego is very loud, and that loudness can be emotional. It can be, can definitely be just maybe just a bunch of noise inside as well. Whatever the case is, disconnecting you from actually the experience, which seems to be what I would say what makes souls be able to stay on track.
Yeah, this really asks us, what are we practicing over and over again? It is kind of a cognitive reprogramming. We're trying to practice different responses to old reactions. So stuff comes up, and before I used to get engaged in the minutia and lose the big picture. Now I'm trying to train myself to, we say, come back to the point, which is the big picture, ironically, but come back, respond to this stuff going on inside of me. And again, doesn't matter if I don't feel it. I recognize it is the right thing to do. And the more I keep practicing, the less numb I will become. I need to give myself time for that to happen. And we're incredibly impatient. And it's a different timeline for every soul. But I know that's the right response to keep practicing. And we're so rusty at it that just even to get to that point of being able to remember that's what I'm supposed to think about is a challenge for us. But I just keep practicing.
Perhaps then I will ask this question because now I feel it's coming in a timely place. Listening again to different students share in terms of some trying to go straight to the experience, but it seems like just from what they're sharing, it can still be I, so and so, I'm having an experience of peace, but I'm not really soul conscious, but trying to go in that way. And then there are those who really want to, of course, use the knowledge, but kind of sort of, it still stays really intellectual. And we kind of seem to either we get stuck there or we kind of sort of go back and forth between the two. And I know you were sharing about sticking with it. But in terms of these two pieces, there seems to be something still missing in terms of awareness, in terms of this broader picture. And the context of this is, I would say, is is, let's just say the simple thing about, consider yourself to be a soul, like your nature is yourself. Some try to go into that experience and they just kind of get lost and fall asleep. Some go into this and it's just a nice little essay exercise inside your mind. So, what is missing in terms of getting there? Because as you were sharing, going all the way, perhaps maybe in both situations, they feel that they are.
A couple of things come into my mind. A huge part of the spiritual study is about following directions. And I do feel we get very clear directions, but our capacity to implement them may not be very good. So I think I'm following the directions, but I'm actually doing what I've always done. So, how I am absorbing, listening to, and absorbing spiritual knowledge, directions is something I'm constantly having to pay attention to. And the other thing, which no one likes to hear actually, is the disciplines of my lifestyle can deeply affect whether or not I'm able to shift and do something new. So it's very humbling, both of those things. Again, there'll be resistance, but I can see it with any other art form or any other practice that I've got a certain way of doing it. Okay, now I've got a different teacher who's giving me different directions. Am I coachable? But also, am I doing the adjustments in my life that will make it possible to follow those new directions? So those are things I have to look at.
Well, thank you for your sharings and insights. I'll have a little reflection.
The essence of spirituality, of course, is to experience myself to be a soul, a spiritual being, not this body, not physical. At the right time in my life, I might come to recognize that that is true. But I may not still feel it, not because I'm not capable of feeling it, but because I haven't for a long time. And there's a lot of opposition from within. The answer is not to battle or push or force or try harder. Quite the opposite. The moment I can just be at peace in this moment, that's when a shift can happen. I need to know the difference between letting go and giving up. I don't give up on recognizing I am a soul, but I do let go of my old ways of trying to move forward. It's a very subtle experience shift inside. So I am patient, I create space, I surround myself with supports, and I maintain that constant flame of belief in the self. I can do this. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So, just a warm reminder that our next Learn About Meditation is on Saturday, July 25th, 12:15 to 1:30. That is on the website, so we do request for souls to register. However, if you forget, don't fret. Please do make sure you check in at the front desk in all situations at the Academy. Then they'll be able to direct you where to go. And we haven't posted yet, but we just wanted to let souls know to save the date for the Raksha Bandhan program that we have every year. And I'm trying to look far ahead if it is Friday. It's August 14th. And so that will take place in Scarborough Hall. So please save the date for that. And we are getting materials together to post that announcement onto the website. So there's, of course, our drop-in sessions at the Inner Peace Center on Mondays, English, 6:30 to 7:30, a bit of a talk and guided meditation, and Hindi, which is all meditation with guided commentary, I believe, on Wednesdays, 6:30 to 7:30. And of course, we have our interview on the Tuesdays on YouTube, and also online meditation on Sundays, 6:30 to 7:30. So thank you for joining with us. By the way, evening meditation on the Thursdays at the Academy, unless it's a stat holiday. Again, it'd be nice if you could register, but again, that's not necessarily required. If you forget, please check in at the front desk. All right, so it's 6:30 to 7 o'clock. All of that is on the website. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.